We haven't even talked about the real power players behind this thing yet. Because when you really start digging into the connections and the people behind this documentary, the story gets even darker. Buckle up. Let's talk about the Big O. If there was one person in Leaving Neverland's media blitz who gave the film an enormous credibility boost, it was Oprah Winfrey. After all, she's not just the most popular talk show host of all time. She's f***ing Oprah, the most powerful woman in media, the former queen of daytime television, and one of the most influential voices in American pop culture history. She's one of those people you only have to address by their first name, and everybody on earth knows who you're talking about. So when Leaving Neverland premiered in 2019, and Oprah not only endorsed it, but created an entire special called After Neverland to double down on the accuser's claims, it sent a loud and clear message to the world. Michael Jackson was guilty, and if you don't believe it, you're part of the problem. And you know what? If that's what she felt strongly in her heart, cool. Stand on business, O. But here's the thing. You and I both know, if there's one thing Oprah is, she's incredibly smart, she's incredibly careful with and protective of her brand, and she's incredibly strategic. So this wasn't just some random case of Oprah supporting a cause she believed in, and her riding for it without vetting it wasn't just some innocent mistake. Because when you look a little deeper into the circumstances of her involvement in Leaving Neverland, things start looking real grimy, like grimy AF. Like, why did Oprah, who had known Michael Jackson personally, immediately back a documentary about him 10 years after he was dead that was completely one-sided and full of easily identifiable inconsistencies and shaky claims without even questioning it or doing her due diligence on the accusers? Oprah has hella fact checkers on the payroll, right? Especially after the Million Little Pieces fiasco. Why wouldn't she use them here? Why was she given a private screening of the film before the public ever saw it on David Geffen's $590 million yacht? Wouldn't she have wondered about that? And why, even after her special After Neverland became one of her biggest media disasters, does she still to this day refuse to address any of Leaving Neverland's glaring contradictions and red flags? Well, grab your popcorn, because when we look closer at the details around her weird-ass 65th birthday gift, the picture starts coming into focus. But first, let's rewind the clock to 1993, the year Oprah conducted one of the most famous interviews of all time, Michael Jackson's first ever sit-down TV interview. At the time, Michael was still riding high off the success of his album Dangerous, and despite the tabloids constantly speculating about his personal life, he was still seen as the biggest star on the planet. So when Oprah landed the first long-form interview with MJ in over a decade, it was a huge deal. And it wasn't just big for Michael, it was big for Oprah too. That interview was one of the highest rated programs in television history, drawing 90 million viewers worldwide. It gave Oprah a level of unshakable credibility and reach that no other talk show host had at the time. And during that interview, Oprah seemed to be fully in Michael's corner. She didn't question his innocence. She didn't push conspiracy theories. She let him tell his story, his childhood abuse, his vitiligo, his pain over the way the media treated him. At one point, she even praised him and called him, quote, a gentle soul. So what changed? Because years later, Oprah went from being one of the only journalists Michael trusted to leading the charge against his legacy and stamping him as an abuser. Why? Well, here's where we have to first introduce David Geffen into the convo, because this is where starts to get real. See, Oprah and Geffen go way back. They've been friends for decades, part of the same ultra-elite Hollywood circle that includes Steven Spielberg, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and other billionaire ultra-powerful media moguls. Oprah had been invited onto David's yacht along with other top A-listers many times over the years. But their relationship goes beyond just friendship. Geffen has been one of Oprah's biggest advisors and behind-the-scenes power players for years. And guess what? Remember, It was on that big-ass yacht of Geffen's on Oprah's 65th birthday that for some reason he decided to give her the super thoughtful, heartwarming gift of sitting her down to a private screening of a 4-hour documentary about two men accusing Michael Jackson of sexually molesting them when they were kids, packed to the brim with graphic depictions of the alleged abuse. What was done, how it was done, for how long, at what intensity, and where. I mean, who the does that for somebody's birthday? And remember, Oprah herself is a survivor of childhood abuse. Jesus, that is like bringing a Holocaust survivor on your yacht for their birthday and then telling them, man, have I got the perfect birthday gift for you. Ta-da! I got 4 straight hours of footage, commentary, and pictures from inside Auschwitz. Have a seat and grab some popcorn, you'll love it. Happy birthday. I mean, damn, if that's what he got his friends, I'd hate to see what he gave his enemies. So obviously, you have to ask yourself this question. Why did David Geffen, a man with no direct ties to Wade Robson or James Safechuck, have a copy of that documentary before it was released? And why would he show that documentary specifically to Oprah on his yacht on her f***ing birthday, who then went on to publicly endorse it on her special without hesitation? Did he want her to do that? Did he ask her to? Why? Well, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes talk in Hollywood and a lot of evidence that points to exactly what Geffen's motivation was. But I'm going to let you in on all that in a minute when we talk about David specifically. First, let's examine how Oprah connects to the entity that actually made and released the film, HBO themselves. What most people didn't realize at the time is that Oprah had deep financial ties to HBO. At the time of Leaving Neverland's release, Oprah had a long-standing partnership with HBO through her network, OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network. OWN had multiple projects distributed through HBO, and Oprah herself had done previous high-profile interviews and specials for HBO in the past. So think about the chain of events and connections here. HBO makes Leaving Neverland, even though they had a past contractual agreement with Michael Jackson that made it a legally risky move. More about that later. Oprah, with close ties to HBO, is given a private pre-release screening on David Geffen's yacht. She then creates the special After Neverland, giving the documentary an even bigger credibility boost, airing it on her own network and HBO simultaneously. The accusers and director Dan Reed get the biggest platforms imaginable for their film and credibility from a respected and beloved media figure and cultural icon without ever having to answer any tough questions. Let's be real. This wasn't just Oprah supporting victims. This was a coordinated media maneuver to establish and legitimize a documentary with a very specific narrative for a very specific purpose, executed by some of the most powerful figures in Hollywood and the entertainment industry. So the question remains, why did Oprah do it? Well, there are a few possible reasons why Oprah so eagerly turned against Michael Jackson. Number one, power and influence. Aligning with HBO and David Geffen meant securing her place among Hollywood's power elite. She didn't want to be on the wrong side of the industry machine. Number two, a personal agenda. Oprah has long been vocal about her own history with sexual abuse, and many believe she saw Leaving Neverland as an opportunity to solidify her brand as a champion for victims, even if it meant backing a story full of contradictions that hadn't been vetted. Number three, maybe she just didn't expect the backlash. Maybe Oprah just flat out underestimated Michael Jackson's fans and the growing number of independent journalists that would be willing to call out the serious flaws in Leaving Neverland. Either way, Oprah's involvement gave Leaving Neverland an immediate credibility and almost bulletproof armor against criticism it never should have had. But now that we've dissected Wade Robson and James Safechuck's questionable claims, and we've analyzed Oprah's role in the game, let's zoom out and ask an even bigger question. Who might have really benefited from Leaving Neverland that isn't obvious? Well, when you continue following the breadcrumb trail of the money, the influence, and the power behind this so-called documentary, you'll keep running into one name: David Geffen. Yep, that David Geffen. It's that time. As I promised, let's get into the details about Geffen's role and his true motivations. David Geffen is a billionaire media mogul, music and film industry powerhouse, and co-founder of DreamWorks SKG alongside Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg. One of the most influential figures in Hollywood. A man so rich and so powerful that politicians, presidential candidates, A-list celebrities, and even tech billionaires line up to be in his good graces. And since Michael Jackson and David Geffen were publicly known to have been friends, why was Geffen even involved in Leaving Neverland? Why was he the one showing the documentary to Oprah on his yacht that's bigger than New Jersey before it was even released to the public? Go refill that popcorn. We're about to dive into the usually hidden from the public inner games and savage politics of Hollywood. Here's the big plot twist. Geffen and Michael Jackson were not friends. To the contrary, they had a history that many believed had turned into outright hostility. As a matter of fact, based on some of the off-the-record information I got, by 2019, David Geffen downright hated Michael Jackson and had for a while. But in the 1980s, Michael Jackson and David Geffen were friendly. Not best friends, they weren't gifting each other Ferraris or summering in the Hamptons together, but they moved in the same elite Hollywood circles. Geffen, as one of the most powerful figures in the music industry, naturally had interactions with Jackson, who was the biggest artist on the planet, and became somewhat of a mentor. But then, things changed, or as we like to say in the African American community, shit went left. According to multiple sources, a rift developed between the two of them in the 1990s when Michael Jackson tried to make a power move in the entertainment business. MJ wanted more control over his career. He was looking to move away from his longtime label Sony and was reportedly considering a shift toward DreamWorks Records, a label co-founded by none other than David Geffen. Seems like a great match, right? One of the biggest names in the music industry working with one of the biggest music moguls in the world. Well, not quite. For reasons that remain murky, Geffen allegedly blocked Jackson from joining DreamWorks Records. Some industry insiders believe this was an intentional move to keep Michael from gaining too much independence and power within the industry. In the documentary Inventing David Geffen, it seems clear that Geffen saw Michael's attempts at gaining total power and control over his own career as undermining the music business model in general, and in particular, Geffen's desire to maintain control over his artist and label. This tug of war led to what some believe was a bitter falling out between Geffen and Jackson. Michael allegedly cut ties with Geffen entirely, effectively icing him out of his career and personal life. And let's just say, David Geffen is not a man who takes rejection lightly. You can ask around. If there's one thing you never want to do in Hollywood, it's cross David Geffen. Geffen is infamous for holding grudges and using his vast influence to make life difficult for anybody who makes the mistake of getting on his bad side. Reporter Nicole Laporte at the time for the Daily Beast described it this way, writing, "Geffen is famous for his decades-long and very ugly feuds. When I called a friend of Geffen's and asked him if he'd speak to me, I was met with a heavy silence on the other end of the line and a deep-throated growl. The last person who wrote a book about David Geffen is dead, and he was young and healthy, and now he's dead." Click. You read into that whatever you want to. Geffen is also legendary for his behind-the-scenes maneuvering in the entertainment industry, pulling strings to get what he wants, whether it's movie deals, music rights, or control over major media narratives. So knowing all that, let's ask a simple question. If Geffen already had a history of going after former allies who crossed him, and if Michael Jackson had publicly snubbed him, and if Geffen had all the connections needed to orchestrate a massive hit piece against MJ and his legacy after his death, do you really believe that he just happened to show Oprah that pre-release copy of Leaving Neverland on his yacht, and she just happened to end up doing a whole show to help promote and legitimize it? Is it all starting to become clear? Again, Oprah Winfrey's not just any media personality. She was and still is one of the most powerful cultural influencers alive. Her endorsement can make or break a public figure, book, or movie. And remember, Oprah had a long history with Michael Jackson. She had interviewed him in 1993 in one of the most watched TV specials of all time. She knew him personally. She also isn't known to be stupid. So why did she suddenly decide to switch up and publicly brand him as a child molester without hesitation? Why did she immediately align herself with Geffen's interests and produce After Neverland, a show meant to reinforce the credibility of Wade Robson and James Safechuck's allegations? And why, after years of carefully curating her reputation, did Oprah make such a risky move of backing two accusers whose claims were already starting to unravel within days of the documentary's release? Simple. Follow the power, follow the money, follow the influence. And Geffen had, and still has, tons of all of it. To this day, what's always been hidden from the public and you is David Geffen was never just a passive viewer of Leaving Neverland. He was one of the unseen forces behind its success. The question is, still, what was Geffen's real motivation? Was this purely a money play, a billionaire wanting to stack more chips just because he could? Was it a typical Hollywood power move? Or was this something deeper and more primal? Well, when you consider Geffen's history, his grudge against Michael, and his ability to control media narratives, I'd say it's option 3. A billionaire used to getting his way at all times and never losing, settling an old score to get revenge on a hated rival. Who cares if he was also a dead man? One thing is certain. If David Geffen wanted to make sure Leaving Neverland was a cultural weapon used against Michael Jackson's legacy, he had all the most powerful, effective tools and weapons to make it happen, including Oprah. And he used them.